This is Dimitri Lascaris reporting from Montreal, Canada for the Real News Network. Today I'm joined by Scott Ritter. Scott is a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer whose service over a 20-plus year career includes tours of duty in the former Soviet Union, implementing arms control agreements, serving on the staff of U.S. General Norman Schwarzkopf during the Gulf War, and later as a chief weapons inspector with the UN in Iraq from 1991 to 1998. He's also the author of several books, including his latest work, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika. Welcome to the Real News, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
So, Scott, the focus of our discussion today, which I'm sure won't be any surprise to you because it's been such a hot topic for all of us recently, is the Ukraine war. And as many of our viewers will know, you've commented and written extensively on the Ukraine war, expressing views which I think it's fair to say have departed considerably from those which dominate Western mainstream discourse about this war. And one of the dominant themes, as you well know, in Western mainstream discourse about this war is that Ukraine is winning and that the performance of Russia's military has ranged from disappointing to disastrous. And that claim reached a fever pitch during the Ukrainian army's recent offensive in the Kharkov region, which resulted in the Ukrainian military seizing control of a large chunk of territory that Russia had controlled for months. But even after the loss of that territory by Russia, Russia still had control of numerous cities that it did not control before the invasion, including Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Mariupol, and Kherson. After the counteroffensive, Russia also retained something very important, a land bridge to Crimea. And finally, two things have happened since the Kharkov counteroffensive. One, the front line appears to have stabilized. And secondly, the Russian military has begun to systematically degrade the power grid in Ukraine. So with that as background, a background with which I'm sure you're completely familiar, what do you make, given current circumstances in the battlefield, about the claim that Ukraine is winning this war and Russia is losing it?
Well, let's just start with basic strategic objectives. Let's look at the Russian strategic objectives first. First and foremost, Russia is seeking to get Europe and the United States to buy into the notion of a negotiated new European security framework. It's something that Russia put on the table prior to invading Ukraine. If people remember back to December 17th, I believe, of last year, Russia submitted two draft treaties, one to NATO, one to the United States, which articulated Russia's stance on what its vision of a new European security framework could look like. They invited the West to read it and have a serious discussion about it, and they were ignored. Then Russia invaded Ukraine, and Russia has two objectives. One is the demilitarization of Ukraine. The other is the denazification of Ukraine. Demilitarization means the elimination of all NATO influence on the Ukrainian military, and denazification means just that, getting rid of everything that Russia considers to be related to the ultra-nationalistic ideology of Stepan Bandera and the white supremacist manifestations of that. Now, these are words that I'm not using. I mean, people go, well, Ritter, yeah, you're very good at Kremlin talking points. I'd advise people to go back and actually read the amendments put by the United States House of Representatives on Department of Defense appropriations legislation from 2015 up until just this year. They continuously forbid funds, U.S. taxpayer funds, being used to train the Azov Battalion, which is listed by the U.S. Congress as a white supremacist neo-Nazi organization. So anybody who wants to pretend that there isn't a Nazi problem in Ukraine, simply I refer you to Congress and its own legislation. The Russians believe that this is a big problem, and they want it eradicated. Now, why did I bring this up? Because Russia hasn't shifted gears at all. I mean, Russia's still saying we want a European security framework out of this, and we are adhering to our original objectives. Russia hasn't altered course at all. Ukraine, on the other hand, is saying that victory can only be achieved when Russia is evicted from all territory.
Afford an additional 3 Turkish drones for the army.
I would say that
But
Russia's
soon
closer to
TB2
achieving its
Bayraktar
objective
became scarce
than
for a
Ukraine
few
is to
simple
achieve
reasons.
its objective.
It's big, expensive,
which
and
tells
an
me
easy target
Russia
for
has
Russian
the
anti-air missiles.
momentum, Russia has the initiative, and
As the
Russia has
Russo-Ukrainian
realistic
war
objectives
slowly
that
went
can
from
be
active
attained.
phase to a cell-mail of trench
Ukraine
warfare
doesn't. I mean,
and
there's
heavy
just
artillery
literally no one
duels,
on this
the
planet
missing piece
besides
for the
maybe,
Ukrainian military was
I don't even
information
think the
on the
Ukrainians believe
battlefield.
it, that they're going to
And their
recapture
innovative solution?
the
Something you
Donbass,
can
that they're
get
going
from
to
Best Buy for
recapture
cheap.
Kherson,
That is,
Zaporizhia,
if you
that
live
they're
in
going
North
to
America.
recapture
The
Crimea.
DJI
Now, this
Mavic.
is fantasy. So you have one side that's
You may have guessed already
their
that the
objectives are
primary use of
fantasy-based.
these
You have another
simple
side
commercial
whose
drones on the
objectives are,
battlefield
while difficult
is
to
not their
achieve,
firing
very
power.
realistic.
It's reconnaissance.
So I'll go with the realistic side over the
Mavic
fantasy
is
side
cheap,
as to who
easy
I
to
think is
use,
going to
and can be
prevail.
applied to
Then we
many
take a look at
recon tasks.
capabilities.
Regardless of its size,
Ukraine had a
Mavic
good
proved
September.
its reliability
There's no one that's
even
gonna
in
debate that
serious
issue
military
whatsoever.
operations.
But at what cost? And what I mean by that is in order to
On May
achieve
12,
this good
2022,
September,
Russian forces
Ukraine had
tried
to
to cross
absorb,
the Seversky Donets River in the
billions, tens
Donbass
of
region.
billions of dollars worth of NATO equipment.
Ukrainian soldiers
Took
knew
months
the
to do
Russians
this.
were going to
It took
cross
months
from
to
this
get people
exact
trained on
place
this, to
and
bring the
asked a
equipment
drone
in,
operator
match
to
the
help
equipment with the
readjust the
people,
trajectory of
organize it,
shells for
and
this
bring it to the
location.
battlefield. And then
When
in
the
1
Russians
month,
deployed pontoon
Ukraine pretty much
bridges and
burned
started
through
crossing,
everything.
the Ukrainian
casualties they've
artillery
suffered have been
fired a
horrific.
volley of
Lost
shells and
equipment,
destroyed
they've
the
lost
whole.
most of the manpower, and they're down to a position now where they're begging the West to help them reconstitute this capability. Russia started September with pretty much the same force structure that it brought in when it invaded in February. And what had happened is Russia pretty much had insufficient resources to the task they had set forth for themselves. They had many parts of their defensive line that were stretched thin. And the Ukrainians were able to exploit this, and the Russians wisely, I believe, traded territory for lives. The Russians aren't in the business of just throwing away Russian lives. And so they weren't going to hold on to a strong point to the last minute. They were more than happy to withdraw, trade territory, save lives, consolidate their defensive positions, all the while inflicting what should have been prohibitive casualties on the Ukrainians, tens of thousands of losses. Meanwhile, while Russia is consolidating their lines, they're reinforcing. Vladimir Putin ordered the partial mobilization. 300,000 reservists have been called up. 87,000 of them are currently deployed into the special military operations zone. The rest are finalizing their organization into fresh combat units, which will give the Russians tremendous flexibility and operational capacity. So as Ukraine is shrinking, let me take a look at the strategic aspects of this conflict. I think the West made a mistake in misinterpreting Russia's soft approach to the special military operation, going in with fewer numbers than many people thought was necessary, and going in softer, not dominant, not using overwhelming firepower. In effect, trying to reduce civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure. While the reduction of civilian casualties continues to be an objective of Russia, the day and age of saying we don't want to harm civilian infrastructure is over. Russia has taken the gloves off and has shown that it can
Whether
close
it's the
down
Turkish
Ukraine as a
Bayraktar,
modern
which
nation
uses
state
missiles for
anytime
ground
it
attack,
wants to.
the Iranian
It's degraded
Shahed
their electrical
136,
grid,
which
their
works
power
like a
grid.
kamikaze plane to destroy
Ukraine
its target,
has rolling
or the Black
blackouts,
Hornet, the
and
world's
the Russians
smallest
are
drone,
taking it
which
easy.
resembles a remote-controlled
Russia could
toy
easily shut
helicopter.
everything down,
There is
but
no
they're not.
denying
They're
that the
making
introduction of
point
drones
blank.
into
They do
modern
this
combat
damage.
has changed the landscape of
Meanwhile,
war.
Russia's just functioning as it is. And then we take it
Nearly
out a
every
step
major
further.
military
It's
has
not just
adopted
Ukraine
their
that's
use
suffering.
in some
You
way.
see, the West thought
But
they
you'd
were
be
going
surprised to hear that
deter
none of
Russian
these military
aggression,
drones
and B,
are as feared as
compel
this
Russia
one,
to stop its
the
aggression
DJI
by imposing,
Mavic.
massive economic
This little
sanctions.
commercial
I think that's
drone
the word.
managed to outshine even the most advanced
Sanctions.
drones in the
I
world
mean, we were
and
told
prove
there were
critical to the
masterful
mission of
economists,
troops on the ground.
experts in energy security.
But how
that
this
had
simple
solved the
consumer-grade
issue of how
drone
to shut
designed for
down
recording
this gas
weddings
station
changed
disguised
the
as a
rules of
nation.
war
All
forever,
we have to do
all
is cut
thanks
off
to
their
one
gas,
man,
their energy,
is
and
not
they're
what you
gonna
think.
shrivel up and go away. Russia proved that the gas station
On the
actually
night of
knows
April
more about
13,
global energy
2022,
security than
Moskva,
West
the
does.
flagship
They
of
flip the
Russia's
script.
Black Sea
Russia's
Fleet,
not the
was
nation
struck
suffering.
by two
Europe
Ukrainian
is suffering.
anti-ship
The entire
missiles,
continent
causing it
is
to
suffering.
catch fire and
America's
sink to the
suffering.
bottom of the
Whereas
sea.
people are talking about we have a couple weeks
Even though
left
the
of
Russian
diesel
ship was
fuel. I
equipped
don't
with
think people
anti-air defense
comprehend what
systems,
that means when you run out of
Bayraktar is
diesel
believed
fuel,
to have
when
played
you
a
get such a
distracting
shortage,
role,
prices
or
go
even
through
having
the roof.
delivered the
It's
first
diesel
strike
powers
to the
trucks
cruiser that
that
destroyed
make
its
the
radar
supply
antenna.
line work, that bring food to our stores at a
Bayraktar
reasonable
showed
price,
exceptional
and you start
success
jacking up
during the
price
first
and the cost
months
of
of the war.
transportation, it will be transferred
After
to the
seeing its
consumer.
footage,
And if you
Ukrainians sent
eliminate
money to
diesel
volunteers
potential to where
with laser-guiding
transportation is frozen,
artillery.
nothing makes it market.
With a
Russia
range of
doesn't
up to
have this
75
problem,
miles
so they've
and
won
flight
that
time of
battle
10
too. So
hours,
across
this
the
sounds
board,
like a
the
great
big
deal.
picture, strategic aspect
Until
of
you look
the West
inside
supporting
and find a
Ukraine,
DSLR
Ukraine's
camera
ability
with
to
a bunch
sustain
of
the
Western
conflict
details
for
that
what's
Russia is
happening on the
smuggling through
battlefield.
other
It's
non-sanctioned
advantage
countries
Russia,
to build
advantage
these
Russia,
drones
advantage
en
Russia.
masse.
Russia's winning this
Oh,
war.
and a bottle
Call it
instead of a
controversial,
proper fuel
that's my
tank.
take.
Now, you touched upon, nuclear
However,
security
this
framework.
price
This is
doesn't
a
stand even
matter
near
that should
affordable
preoccupy us all,
compared to the
a matter
Russian
we have
kamikaze
no
drone
business in.
Geran 2.
And the subject of nuclear war has come up repeatedly in the mainstream.
Seeing that out of 4,500 missiles
since the
fired at
special
Ukraine,
military
only
operation began,
40%
and
hit
again,
their
the
initial
predominant
targets,
narrative in the
Geran
West is
2
that
became the
Russia
cheapest
is threatening
alternative
to use
to
nuclear
missiles
weapons,
like
and its
Khalid
government cannot
for a
be
price
trusted to
tag of
manage
$20,000
its massive
instead
nuclear
of
arsenal
$6.5
responsibly.
million.
But in the years leading up to the
With a
special
range of
military operation, it was the
1,550
United
miles,
States
the drone
and
hit
not Russia
most
that
of
was
its
killed
targets
from
and
major
became
arms
too
control treaties, as
expensive
you
to shoot
talked about.
down.
Oftentimes, in
The only
2002, the
downside
Bush
to it is
administration
one of the most
withdrew
dangerous.
the U.S. from the anti-ballistic missile
What
treaty.
makes it so
In
dangerous
2008,
is the
Trump
richest
administration
man in
withdrew
the
U.S.
world.
from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. And in that
Thanks
same
to
year,
Elon
the Trump
Musk's
administration
Starlink
withdrew the
satellites,
United States from the
Ukrainian
Joint
drones can
Comprehensive
live
Plan of
stream
Action
the
with
camera
Iran,
feed
also known
directly
as
to the
Iran
operator, who
nuclear
can
deal.
correct artillery trajectories
I'd like to know
and
your
report
thoughts,
on
Scott,
enemy
the
movement in real
importance of
time.
those treaties to global nuclear security,
Without
and whether
Starlink,
the United States
Ukrainian
government, in
forces'
your opinion,
artillery
had any
accuracy
valid
would
reasons to withdraw from
significantly
any of
drop
those treaties.
and would force soldiers to spend
Well, let's just
more
start
of their
with,
already
with
scarce
first
ammo.
principles. Here we are, 2022.
Even though
and
Ukraine's
we have
Minister
a
of
bunch of
Defense
people
said
running
that
around as if
Mavics are
they've
just drones
invented the
intended for
concept
recording weddings,
of,
they're still playing a
nuclear
huge role in this
security
war,
and,
and
a
DJI is
nuclear-based,
mad about it.
Muscle flexing.
In April 2022,
no, we
DJI
tried it before
Technology
in the
suspended
1960s.
its
We did
business
the whole
in
arms
Russia
race
and
thing.
Ukraine to
And
stop
we
the use of
realized
its
at one
products in
time that
combat.
we'll quickly bankrupt ourselves.
As a
and get
DJI
nothing from
spokesperson
if we
said, it
continue
was
to
all
try
about
to
making
build
a
bigger and
statement
better missiles,
about their
more warheads,
principles.
all this stuff.
DJI's
One of the
decision
first things we
adds
had to
much more
teach
pressure
ourselves
to
back
Ukraine,
then
as the
is that
army
you
now
can't
relies
win
on
a nuclear
volunteers
war.
who can cross
You
the
can't
border,
win it.
buy Mavics,
Should
and bring
never
them
be
back
fought.
into Ukraine, which
And
complicates
that's
the
when we
logistics of
embraced
acquiring
something
these
that
drones.
one would normally say shouldn't be embraced. The notion
In
of
response,
mutually
the
assured
Ukrainian
discharge.
government cancelled
That is,
all
if I use a
border
nuclear
taxes
weapon
on
against
drone
you,
imports to ease
not
the
only will I
pain
kill
of the
you, but
army.
you're going to use a nuclear weapon against me, and you're
But
going
in
to
the
kill me.
end, all these efforts may
The
have been
best
for
way to
nothing.
keep mutually assured destruction alive and viable was to
SpaceX, the
stop
company that
pretending
provided
to
Ukrainian
defend against
soldiers with a
nuclear
stable Starlink
that's
connection,
the other part of the
restricted
arms
its
race
service
that
for
was
armed
starting to occur.
forces,
Not only were we building
arguing
bigger
units,
missiles and
including its
stuff,
tanks,
we're trying to
light
build
armor,
defenses
and
against such
infantry.
missiles. And all that happens when you build
This
a
incident
defense is
made
that
one
they build a
thing
better
obvious.
offense to get it.
Information
You build,
is the most valuable
500
weapon to
missile
defeat the enemy,
interceptor system.
especially
They
in
put
close-range
multiple warheads
engagements.
on their missiles, so they have 1,500
The Mavic stepped in
coming
and
out. You
rewrote
put
the rules of
1,500
ground
down,
warfare,
they double their
making
missiles.
both sides change
And
their
the bottom line
tactics
is you'll
of
never
waging
catch
war.
up, and everybody go
But in the
bankrupt,
end,
and you
it's all
increase
about
the
sweet,
possibility of nuclear
sweet
conflict.
money.
So the decision was taken to sign the anti-ballistic missile
Think of it this way.
in 1972.
What happens if you attach a
And this
$200
basically said,
grenade to a
yeah, we can have
$3,000
nuclear
drone
weapons, but
and
we
drop
both
it on an
agree that
abandoned
if we
tank?
use them, we're all going to die, and we're not even
That's
gonna
right.
pretend. We're not
You
even
destroy
gonna
a
try and
$3
defend
million
ourselves.
piece
That's
of
it.
equipment with
And this opened the door for
$3,200.
what's called the strategic arms
The new
limitation
trend
clause.
of inflicting
We
the
weren't
most
talking about
damage with
reducing
low-cost
the
solutions
numbers, but we
has
were
made
talking
both
about putting an
sides
account
think
on how many
outside of the
weapons we build
Mavic.
and what kinds of weapons. It was the beginning
Sure, a wedding
of
drone is great for
responsible
small
dialogue
operations,
between the United
but what if
States
you need to
and the Soviet
accomplish
Union
more on the
on
battlefield,
nuclear
like
weapons.
going deeper
And from
behind the
strategic
front
arms
lines?
limitation talks,
And that's how Mavic pushed
once
other
we
drones to do the
reached these
thing they were
caps,
built for.
we realized
The Russian
that's too
Orlan
many.
10 is an
And we need to
example
start
of that.
talk about reducing. And it took a while to get there. It wasn't
This
an
seemingly
easy
small
transition.
UAV utilizes
The
a
first thing
portable
we
launch
that
complex
helped
and
the pivot
control station
was the
for a total
Intermediate
price
Nuclear
of
Forces Treaty, signed in
$120,000.
1987.
It is deemed the
Implementation
most
began in
successful
July
drone in the
1st,
Russian army. Its
1988.
controversy with
This
the
one's
Iranian
personal to me
government,
because
which
this
is
is the one that
suspected
I
of
played in
supplying
part in.
Shahed
I was actually
Su-36 drones to Russia, which really resemble Garand II.
That honorific, it's meaningless, but
But the most
it's a cool
commonly
thing
used
to have in
kamikaze
your,
drone
you
that
know,
is not getting enough
in
credit
your memoirs.
is the Lancet
But,
drone.
but I did play an important part in the
As a loitering
implementation of this
munition with a
treaty.
range of
This treaty
25
saved the
miles
world,
and
I
armed
believe,
with
from nuclear
explosives, this
annihilation.
manually controlled
We
drone
had
can destroy
acquired certain
Ukrainian
weapons
vehicles in the
capabilities
short
Europe, both
range.
Soviet and American.
Although there have been some
SS-20
instances
missiles,
where it
Pershing
got
II
stuck
missiles,
in a
ground-launched cruise
fishnet.
missiles that put us on literally
Ukraine, on the other hand, doesn't have much money to put into expensive drone building, so the government heavily relies on domestically made drones from private businesses and also aid packages from other countries, making Ukraine a test field for drones of all sizes. Speaking of size, it turns out it doesn't matter. The Black Hornet is one of the drones that proves this. Designed to be the smallest reconnaissance drone on Earth, weighing just over 1 ounce and armed with 1 thermal or 2 daytime cameras.
You get to thank the United States for that.
Ukrainian operators have already published a review on it, saying it cannot replace the Mavic, but it will be a great addition to the highly specialized tasks for special operation units.
But this stalled. Why did it stall?
Have you seen the big propellers of Taiwan? The Revolver 860, a drone which can carry up to 8 60mm shells to drop on enemies' armor.
But then the Soviet Union collapsed.
As for eliminating manpower, Switchblade 300 is becoming a popular option, especially in the hands of Ukrainian special forces. As for regular troops, self-made is always a choice. First-person drones you might have seen on races or filming incredible shots are now being armed with explosives that can be guided by the operator toward light armor and infantry. They can cost as little as $350
we just weren't afraid of anybody. We were the sole remaining superpower.
As a response to the Russian Orlan, the Ukrainian-developed Valkyrie has slightly worse performance than its Russian counterpart, but is now considered